Hello, hello. Welcome to the Get a Six Figure Job You Love and Thrive podcast. And welcome to my YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. Today's episode is all about how to diagnose exactly why you're not getting an offer. So let's get into it. So there are three tiers that I like to go through with clients, not necessarily in order, but there's normally three big areas that I'll ask when someone comes to me and they're like, this is the problem I'm having. I'm not getting offers. I'll say, okay, first of all, we'll look at the macro, which is pretty easy to see. And the reason why I go here first is because I can see through their actions, through what they've already done or tried, we'll work our way down and see where their head's at. So on the macro level, we have your activities. How many jobs have you applied for? How have you applied for those jobs? Have they been through Easy Apply? Have they been through a website? Can you guarantee that anybody has seen what you've submitted? And this to me is the most basic, right? If someone has submitted 3,500 resumes and not had a reply, we can look at the way that they're doing that. The approach is not working for them, right? So on the macro level, we can get an insight into the problem. Like there's clues that we're going to get right away, right? So how many on the macro level still, how many people have you spoken to? And how many people know you are available for work? How many people know what you do? The amount of people you've talked to, what you're offering to do for who, simply speaking, and how are you doing it, right? Are you cold applying? Are you having these conversations? Okay, that's the macro level. Okay, then we move down to the micro level. Let's say you're having lots of conversations. So that'll be either one on the macro level, you'll be in one of two places. Either, no, I haven't taken any action, or maybe I've been on one interview in 3 months. And then we can see that obviously you haven't taken enough action there. Or you'll be in the second camp where you'll be like, oh no, I've taken a ton of action, but it hasn't worked. I've submitted all these resumes. Maybe I'm getting a few interviews. Maybe you're getting a lot of interviews. Hasn't worked. Haven't landed an offer. So then we'll move down to the micro level and I'll look at whether or not you're doing a few things. So in my program, I have a checklist. I'll look at things like congruency and the 4 steps for influence and all that, but I'll go through it roughly here for you. So on the micro level, we're going to be looking at, are you congruent with the value that you bring? Are you aware of the value that you bring? And a lot of people will say, oh, yeah, I am. I'm telling stories and they're really valuable and it's going great, but it's still not working. And so I'll be like, okay, the results, the proof is in the pudding, right? If you're not getting the results, then there could be things to look at there for sure. So then I'll ask you some questions around your value and ask you to present that relevant value for the jobs that you're applying for, and we'll see. And maybe you'll be doing a great job of that. It's possible that you are. Okay. It's possible that you're not. And then that's the next thing to work on, right? So you have to be aware of your value, congruent with the value that you bring, and basically no part of your body has any doubts that you can bring this value. And if you do have doubts that you've already done something or you haven't done something before, you have to have that really strong belief that you can figure anything out, right? So even if you haven't done it before, it's not a problem. You can figure anything out, right? So that's on the micro level. You need to have certain beliefs there and you need to have certain things in your mindset already decided. And those need to be solid because when we get rejections, those things can get rocked if we allow them to, right? So there's always the option. When you get a rejection, it can fuel you or it can erode your confidence. That's a choice that we always make, right? And by default, the easiest thing to do is just let it erode your confidence and feel bad and feel like it's personal. The easiest thing to do is feel negative. The brain will go there automatically. So what takes work is conditioning new thoughts, new ideas that you can get on board with that will help you to use these things as fuel and help you use them as stepping stones. So that's the micro level. And then the third level is you. So by you, I mean your identity, your mindset. This is where all the blind spots are. This is probably the level we spend most time on inside my career coaching program, the 6-figure curriculum. So on our calls on Tuesdays, we'll probably spend the most time here. And that is at a you level, right? So who's actually showing up for this interview? And the way that we kind of look at this is we measure it by your emotional homeostasis throughout the day. So, what is your range of emotions throughout your days when you're in a job search, or even when you're at work if you have a current role? What is your emotional homeostasis? So, if you were to map or chart your emotional range, what you experience throughout the day, and you were to rate it on a 1 to 10, and I asked you, what is that? And you might say, well, what do you mean by that? And I would say, okay, well, were you feeling anxiety? Were you feeling nervous? Were you feeling defeated? Were you feeling discouraged? Were you feeling disheartened? Were you feeling like, how were you feeling? Were you feeling curious? Were you feeling motivated? Were you feeling excited? Were you feeling empowered, powerful, eager, determined? What was your feelings throughout the day? And so many people, they don't know how to regulate these emotions or how to create the internal world really strongly so that nothing affects them on the outside. That's the name of the game. So they'll say, oh, yeah, I was all over the place. I was feeling distraught. I was feeling frustrated. I was feeling disheartened, discouraged. I had a rejection. And then I had a whole bunch of applications that didn't get a response. And then I had this and so if that's the case, if they're feeling disheartened and discouraged because they allowed those things to create those feelings in them, then you would probably rate your emotional homeostasis low for that day. Probably be like a 3 or a 4 or something, right? Whereas if you had outside circumstances happen, say you got a rejection, same thing, and you also submitted a bunch of applications and they also didn't get responses, and you said, oh, yeah, it was fine. I got that rejection. I was happy to get that closure. I had already moved on. I had this and this and this in the pipeline. I was feeling confident. I reconnected with my value. I did these, like you did the internal work to feel strong and grounded that day. Then you're going to rate yourself high, right? So, because your internal world is what you get reflecting back to you on the outside. Okay. And not right away. You got to practice the internal, how you want to feel internally so that it can show up on the outside. And most people are living from the outside in. They're using what they see on the outside to then make them feel something on the inside. And that is usually going to be negative. It's usually going to be bad. And they can get sucked down into that very, very easily. Like I said, that is the easiest thing to do. And so to rate yourself high, it involves some work. It involves some wiring. It involves some practice. It is like going to the gym for your brain, right? So I've been lifting weights now for 6 months consistently, not missing more than a day a week here or there. And it is much easier now to go in and get into those moves, do the combos properly, do the form, have the form properly done. Much easier to do because of that repetition, right? I still don't want to do it some days. I still don't want to do it most days, but it's easier. My body just remembers and I just get into it, right? And that's from repetition. So the same thing happens for your mind, right? And so you need to live from the inside out. You need to create what you want to feel on the inside, decide intentionally how you're feeling on the inside, and then that will create different results on the outside. But it won't happen in one day, right? And we have to just do it until it starts to show up on the outside. And that's where people they can say they get impatient, and that's from lack of belief that they're doing it right, lack of belief in the results, right? And so we can bring in the results faster when we stay committed to what we want to feel in our internal world. So that's how I finally understood it. I was like, oh, okay. So if I keep my internal world protected, if I keep my internal world decisive, if I keep myself regulated and my emotional homeostasis on the internal is strong, powerful, no matter what happens on the outside, then I can create the results I want. Essentially, it is that simple. However, it's not easy to do. It takes practice, right? So, questions you can ask yourself. Are you living from the inside out or from the outside in? What are you telling yourself that day that's making you feel disheartened, dejected, discouraged? What interpretations were you making from that rejection? What did you make it mean that you got rejected? Were you taking that personally? What predictions have you decided are true, right? Are you deciding that because you didn't get that job that the market is bad? Are you deciding that because you didn't get that job, you're no good at it? Are you deciding that because you didn't get that, you're never going to get it? What are you choosing to think that is making you feel dejected and disheartened? Okay. So you can stop predicting things you don't want to happen because you're basically worrying about a future that hasn't happened yet. So that's something that one of my mentors said. She's like, worrying is like praying for something you don't want, right? Completely useless and not helpful. So you need to train yourself out of this before you see the success, right? So you need to live from the inside out until you start to see the success. So if you're feeling reactive, afraid, nervous, worried, if you're feeling anxiety, that is what you are putting out and that is what is reflecting back. So I'm not saying never feel bad feelings, never feel negative. You have to be high vibe all the time, be happy all the time. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying it is perfectly normal to get into a nervous, afraid, reactive, worried, anxious state. All we can do as humans is become aware of it. And then we are already light years ahead of most other humans. So when you become aware of it, then you can gain some authority over it, right? So happens to me all the time. I will have a thought and I just won't let it go super far. I just won't make it a big deal. I just won't live from it. I'll just be like, oh, I see that thought. Okay. And sometimes it won't want to go away. Sometimes it'll be with me for a little while. And I'll say, this is temporary. I'm working through this emotion right now. And I've become good at feeling the emotion, just allowing it to be there, understanding that this is part of being a human. So, if anything, it's awareness. Okay. It's just awareness of being, sometimes you're feeling discouraged, dejected because you got rejected. Okay. That makes sense. Right. But your choice is always what you're going to intentionally think and for how long you're going to let that continue. And it's a practice. The more you keep bringing yourself back, the better you will get at it and the stronger your mindset will be, the tougher you will become mentally and the faster you will see success and the sooner you will see that offer come in. Okay? So, I'm not saying you have to be high vibe all the time. That is not the point of being here. If we were high vibe all the time, we wouldn't know what it meant to have a low vibe. We wouldn't know what it meant to feel anything other than wonderful. And we would not evolve and we would have no contrast. So good wouldn't even be good. There would be no word for it because it would just be normal, right? So we need to have that. But when you're going throughout your day, when you're trying to accomplish a goal, you're going to realize that those emotions are optional when you can catch them. So a 10 out of 10 would be you got a rejection. 4 people told you to bugger off. You didn't get responses from 3 people that you were hoping to get responses from. And basically, when you don't give your power to those circumstances, you can choose to feel emotionally regulated on the inside because you can choose to decide what to think. And this is what successful people do. It's not complicated. It's just a practice. So if you have been sitting around for 3 hours tweaking your resume, for example, or if you spent 2 days waiting to hear back from somebody, if you've just been easy applying and thinking you have to easy apply 10 times more, this is behavior from somebody who is feeling afraid and probably frustrated, right? Somebody who is feeling a 10 out of 10 is probably getting more creative with their reach outs, getting more creative with how they're offering things, getting more creative with how they're conducting their day, right? It's called taking emotional risks and getting more creative, more resourceful about how you're doing things. And you'll be in that creation mode. So you'll be feeling differently as you do these things. Okay. You'll be feeling differently. It's like the feeling of creation is different from the feeling of doing something to keep busy or to feel productive and then sitting and waiting to hope that it works. That's a very different vibe, right? It's like when you're in creation mode, you know that you're working. You know that what you're doing is working. It's a feeling, right? And that when you have that belief locked in that you're getting your 6-figure job, whatever the goal is, you've got that locked in, your creation will pull you. You will be pulled forward and you will know what to do. The path will light up in front of you. So this is what we are working on most of the time inside my career coaching program, the 6-figure curriculum. And on the Tuesday calls, this is what we're doing. So my aim is to help people light up that path in front of them so that they can take those next steps, right? And the more that you see those next steps for yourself with some help from either a coach or you self-coach, if you learn how, you will be able to do that over and over and over again for yourself, and you won't need to rely on anybody to do it. However, in the beginning, it is very helpful to have someone show you how to do it. So then you can take those skills and put them into practice yourself. And this is really something I wish we were taught in school, because it would have been a lot more valuable than parabolas and quadratic functions and things in math that I will never ever need to know about again. But that's why I learned it, and now I'm teaching it. So that is essentially what we need to do. We need to look at these three areas. So on the macro level, the micro level, and then your mindset, what's going on in your head, right? And what's going on in your head controls how you feel, and how you feel controls what you do and what action you take. And that spits out the results that you get. All right. I hope this was helpful. My 3-day training is coming up. We will be talking more in detail about this, and I'll be giving you a little diagram to look at and self-diagnose yourself to see what area you need to start working on. And if it's a mindset thing, if it's a you thing, then that is a great place to come for coaching to get those mindset breakthroughs so you can move forward. And not only will you learn how to get your next job through this process, you will learn how to achieve any other goal that you want to achieve, because this is essentially a proven timeless process that will help you to create for yourself. So thank you very much for listening and for being here, and I will talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.